The oracle had spoken. A great empire would fall. Cyrus, the richest king in the world, packed his treasury, called in his allies, and marched his legendary cavalry east across the Halys River. He was absolutely certain he was about to destroy Persia. He had no idea he was about to lose everything he had ever owned. Welcome back. Last time, Cyrus the Great overthrew the Median Empire in 3 years, turned his captor into a court guest, and doubled the size of his kingdom overnight. Now the most powerful king in the West has decided that Cyrus needs to be stopped before he gets any bigger. His name is Cyrus of Lydia, and he is about to make the most expensive mistake in ancient history. Cyrus was not stupid. He was actually one of the more sophisticated rulers of his era. He had built Lydia into a commercial powerhouse, invented coinage as we understand it, and cultivated relationships with the great oracles and temples of the Greek world. He was well-connected, well-funded, and well-armed. His cavalry was the finest in the region, bred from the best horses in Anatolia, trained for the kind of open-field charge that had won battles for generations. He also had allies. He sent word to Sparta, to Egypt, and to Babylon, asking them to join him in a coalition against this rising Persian threat. The plan was to wait for spring, when all the allied armies could march together, and then crush Cyrus with overwhelming force. Cyrus did not wait for spring. The two armies met at a place called Tyria in central Anatolia in 547 BC. The battle was brutal and inconclusive. Neither side broke. When night fell, both armies pulled back and counted their dead. Cyrus looked at his losses and made a reasonable decision. His allied reinforcements had not yet arrived. He would retreat to his capital at Sardis, regroup over winter, and resume the campaign in the spring with a much larger force. He dismissed a portion of his army and began the march home. He sent messengers to his allies, telling them to be ready by spring. Cyrus followed him immediately. This was not what Cyrus expected. No one campaigned in winter. The roads were bad, the supply lines were stretched, and the cold made everything harder. It was simply not done, but Cyrus understood something that Cyrus did not. The moment you give a man time to regroup, you have already lost half the... He pushed his army hard through the autumn cold and arrived outside Sardis before Cyrus had finished sending his letters. Cyrus had no choice but to fight. He rode out onto the plain before the city walls with what cavalry he had left, confident that his horsemen could hold the line long enough for reinforcements to arrive. The Lydian cavalry was genuinely fearsome. These were not light skirmishers. These were heavy-mounted warriors on large, well-trained horses, and they had broken enemy lines before. What happened next is one of the strangest tactical decisions in ancient military history, and it worked perfectly. Cyrus had a problem. His infantry was solid, but his cavalry was outnumbered and outclassed by the Lydians. A straight cavalry engagement would likely go badly for him, so he looked at his supply train, and he had an idea. He took all the camels that had been carrying baggage and supplies, stripped them of their loads, and placed them at the front of his formation, directly facing the Lydian cavalry. Horses hate camels. This is not a metaphor. Horses that have never encountered camels before react to their smell with something close to panic. They will not charge toward them. They will not hold formation near them. They will simply refuse to go forward, and if pushed, they will bolt. The Lydian cavalry had never seen a camel in battle. When the Persian line advanced and the smell hit them, the horses went mad. Riders who had trained for years suddenly had no control over their mounts. The famous Lydian cavalry, the weapon Cyrus had built his entire military strategy around, dissolved into chaos before it ever made contact with the enemy. Croesus retreated behind the walls of Sardis. Cyrus besieged the city. 14 days later, a Persian soldier noticed a Lydian defender climb down the outer wall to retrieve a dropped helmet and realized that section of the wall was unguarded. The Persians scaled it that night. Sardis fell. Croesus was captured. Herodotus tells us that Cyrus initially ordered Croesus burned alive on a great pyre. As the flames were being lit, Croesus called out the name of Solon, an Athenian philosopher who had once visited his court. Cyrus, curious, asked what the name meant. Croesus told him the story. Solon had come to Lydia, seen all the wealth and splendor, and when Croesus asked him who the happiest man in the world was, expecting to be named, Solon had said, "Call no man happy until he is dead. No one can know what fortune will bring." Cyrus stood there for a moment, thinking about his own mortality, his own fortune, his own future. He ordered the fire put out. He kept Croesus alive as an advisor. The man who had come to destroy him became one of his counselors. With Lydia gone, Cyrus turned east and south. He spent the next several years consolidating his eastern territories, pushing into Central Asia, establishing the borders of what was becoming the largest empire the world had ever seen. But there was one prize left, one city that every conqueror dreamed of, the oldest, richest, most storied city in the ancient world, Babylon. Babylon in 539 BC was still magnificent, but it was also deeply unhappy. The king, Nabonidus, had made himself spectacularly unpopular. He had moved the sacred statues of the Babylonian gods to the capital, which the priests interpreted as an insult to the gods of the outlying cities. He had spent years away from Babylon on a personal religious retreat in the Arabian desert, leaving his son Belshazzar in charge. The priests of Marduk, the chief god of Babylon, had essentially decided that Nabonidus was a heretic, and they were looking for an alternative. Cyrus presented himself as that alternative. His propaganda machine, which was genuinely sophisticated for its era, spread the message that Marduk himself had chosen Cyrus to liberate Babylon from its impious king. Whether anyone actually believed this is debatable, but the priests of Marduk opened the gates. The story of how Cyrus actually entered the city is one of the great engineering feats of the ancient world. The Euphrates River ran directly through Babylon, entering and exiting through massive gated walls. Cyrus diverted the river upstream, lowering the water level inside the city until his soldiers could wade in through the riverbed under the walls, while the city was celebrating a festival and most of the guards were drunk. The city fell without a significant battle. Nabonidus was captured. Cyrus entered Babylon not as a conqueror but as a liberator, walking through the streets while the population cheered. He restored the statues of the gods to their home cities. He released the peoples that Babylon had held captive, including a group of exiles from a small kingdom called Judah, who went home and wrote about it in a book that is still read today. He had the Cyrus Cylinder inscribed, a clay document that declared his policy of religious tolerance and the freedom of conquered peoples to practice their own traditions. It is sometimes called the first declaration of human rights in history, though historians debate exactly how to interpret it. What is not debatable is that it was a radical departure from how conquerors had behaved before him. Cyrus now ruled an empire stretching from the Aegean coast to the borders of India. He had done it in less than 30 years, starting from a small vassal kingdom that no one took seriously. He was in his 60s, by ancient standards an old man, and he had built something that had never existed before. He died in 530 BC, fighting a nomadic people called the Massacheti on the northeastern frontier of his empire. The details are disputed. Herodotus says their queen, Tomyris, had warned him not to cross into her territory, and when he did anyway, she defeated him in battle and had his head placed in a wineskin filled with blood, saying he had always thirsted for blood, and now he could drink his fill. Other sources say he died in battle without the dramatic ending. We do not know for certain. What we do know is that he left behind an empire and a son. The son's name was Cambyses, and the empire was about to get very strange.